Hello and welcome. Today we've got Michelle Fielding, and she says on Sunday that we need to do an urgent interview regarding Ukraine, Putin, Trump, the deep state, and much more. We haven't even had a coffee. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to our Telegram channels and to nicholasveniamin.com for my free email updates. And if you're watching this for the first time on YouTube, I will leave the link below in the description for the full interview. Unless, of course, myself and Michelle can choose our words wisely due to the insane censorship that's happening right now. Michelle, thank you for joining me. How are you and what have you been up to?
Hello, Nick. So recently I've been down to Southampton to meet the people there that are the truthers and the spiritual groups. And they do the stand in the park every Sunday, and they've made a really big group there of over 70 people. And so I was invited to one of their lunches a week ago, and I met lots of really interesting people, including AJ Roberts, who you've had on your show this week, and lots of others. So it was a really, really nice time to meet up with everyone.
That's really nice. So I've been having a very interesting week, interviewing many interesting people. And one of the very interesting people that I've been interviewing was Alan Fountain.
Yeah.
He says, after there's been so much confusion about what's really going on, because obviously even the alternative media like RT News on television and Fox News, they all have to play the optics. And we're all confused that Putin is this bad person, when Alan Fountain confirmed that he's attacking strategically the deep state out of Ukraine. Now, you say that you've been channeling. You've been doing lots of channeling before. I just want to remind the viewers that you said Biden would be inaugurated, and he was, and nobody knew that, and everyone trolled you at the time, and you were right. And you also said that Facebook would rebrand 8 months ago, and only a few months up before now, they rebranded. So you're absolutely right. So now I'm taking this channeling more seriously because it wasn't something that I bought into before. So why don't you give us a short presentation about the channeling you've been doing lately with Starlink and Ukraine and what's really going on with Putin and the White Hats and Trump? And I'm going to sit back like a student and listen to you, and I'll be taking notes down.
Okay. So obviously once this erupted a few days ago, I had an awful lot of people contacting me because they don't really understand what's going on right now. And so I had to have a crash course in Russian politics and particularly the Ukraine. And I have to give credit to Charlie Ward, who helped me yesterday he spent quite a lot of time with me just explaining to me the Russian setup, basically the political setup. Because if I don't have that clear in my mind, I don't know what questions to ask. So I then prepared all the questions, and then at 2 a.m. this morning, they were ready to give me some answers. So I've actually been channeling through the night. So between 2 and 5 a.m. I've been channeling. So I'm hoping that what they've given me today will help to make things a lot clearer for people. Okay. So as everybody knows, I'm not a political commentator in the respect that I'm not an expert in politics. My background is I'm a spiritual teacher and coach. But for some reason, since everything has happened over the past 2 years, they do like to give me some military downloads, as people like to call it. So I wanted to ask them what's going on with the Ukraine. And I started by asking them, is this a war in the traditional sense? Or is it really about something else? i.e., is it about the deep state, as your friend Alan Fountain has been saying? And what they said to me was that this is a fight for the enlightenment of humanity to the goings-on of the corrupt officials, politicians, and bankers that have kept humanity enslaved in a matrix of fear, unhappiness, and strife. And I said to them, in what way, though, would this reflect badly on Biden? Because, I was thinking that maybe people would blame Biden at the moment for the Ukraine, and I was trying to see how they might be able to do that. And they were saying that Biden and his crime family have already been involved with the Ukraine, and they've had many shady undertakings and dealings for many years, along with the Clintons, the Obamas, and the Bushes. They said that the current events are most likely going to draw attention to their involvement for these many years in the past, and it's going to awaken the people to the true nature of their current and past leadership choices in the USA. They said this is an awakening for humanity as they start to acknowledge the cancer in the legislative and the administrative structures which are all around them. So again, I asked, so is the Ukraine in a war in like the traditional sense? And they said no, because it's a tactical response to remove the bad players and secure the area so that all corruption can be extinguished. I asked them, is the geography of the world at the moment, is it going to be sort of like sliced up in terms of, are we going to have commanders in chief overseeing different geographical areas? And they said that, I said, so for example, could a leader of one of these countries oversee more than one country in the future? So for example, could Putin in the future be looking at overseeing more than what he currently looks after? And they said that at the moment, in terms of Putin and him potentially being a commander-in-chief, that the plan is on hold until the peace is set, until they have peace settled in these and secured in these Russian provinces. So part of where we're heading and how it's going to be managed, in our last interview, we talked about how the military were going to be the guardians of the Starlink and how that was going to oversee the countries. And what they're saying now is that these commanders in chief that will be overseeing these military operations, they might in the future have the capacity to oversee larger areas than they currently already hold. But in order for Putin to be able to do that, he needs to secure peace within the Russian provinces. So I said, is Putin a commander-in-chief for the White Hats? And they said that Putin works strategically with Trump and China, and they said that Xi Jinping, so not the CCP. And I said, so what are they actually trying to do, these White Hats? And they said they are trying to secure world peace by ridding all areas of corruption and the deep state. So then I said, is Putin agreeing to this move within the Ukraine to help Trump? And they said no. They said that Putin is making this move to secure a stronghold of peace within Russia, again, free of deep state interference. And I said, are they destroying bio in the Ukraine? Because I've been hearing that the US having invested in some laboratories there where they've been doing bio research and things. And they said that that was true, that they are destroying bio while they're in there, amongst other things. Yeah, it's that bio material.
Just say something they'll put in the air that's bad for us.
Yeah. They said they are doing that. They are destroying those and amongst other things. And I said, what are the other things? And they just repeated again that they're removing bad players, deep state, bad money, and corrupt organizations. And I said to them, is this a war on the people? Because I think this is where the confusion is coming in. This is not a war on the people. They said this is not a war on the people because they want them to be free of tyranny. And so that's what they're helping them to do longer term. So at the moment, it may not look like that because whenever there are upheavals like this or war, you know, there are potential consequences. It's not an exact science. You never know what's going to happen when they go in. I've also been told that the gold from Building 7 of the Twin Towers event was being held in the Ukraine. And I asked them about that and they said, yes, that's correct. And I said, who put the gold there? And they said, again, it was the Biden, Obama, Clinton and Bush families, that they are all complicit in having moved the funds and gold and doing other illegal transactions through which they fed through the Ukraine. And I said, other illegal transactions, what would that be? And they said that was children and human trafficking. They said that the biolabs, I said, are the biolabs in the Ukraine, are they actually a threat? And they said that the experimentation in these labs could be harmful to the human condition. You know, sometimes they give us strange definitions. And I said, what, the human condition? And they said that they have been experimenting with gene mutation and viruses for that bio attack scenario that we were talking about before. And I said, but yes, you know, we've heard this scenario before with Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan. You know, they're always saying there's something like that as an excuse to go in. And they're saying that, yes, before those excuses have been used as a pretense to garner power and control people. But they said at this time, the bio spray that we were talking about, it really is a real danger to humanity. And then I asked them, so what are the white hats actually, what's their plan with regards to the Ukraine? And interestingly, they said the white hats did not order a full-scale attack or a war, but their aim actually longer term and overall is to secure peace like worldwide. So I said, is Putin a white hat? And they said he is. And I said, but you know, he's ordered this war. And we're saying that the white hats, their aim is to secure world peace. And I'm saying, so, you know, if Putin's a white hat, why is he supposedly ordering war? And they said, in the traditional sense, this is not actually a war. They're saying it's a way to quickly neutralize the threats within the Ukraine, which are being used against the people. They're saying that also the deep state have been controlling not just Kiev, which is the capital of the Ukraine, but they did say the deep state are also controlling other areas around Russia. They mentioned Zagreb a couple of times and other locations. So this is not just one area where this is a problem. I then wanted to know why the Ukraine were not in NATO and why Putin was trying to stop them from joining NATO. And they said that in the future, a new peace or military plan is being developed worldwide using the Starlink infrastructure. And we've talked about this before in our previous interviews. And they're saying that the military will oversee the process of peace worldwide in the future. And so NATO, in the longer term, will be outdated. It'll be an outdated military practice. And they're saying that Putin is trying to move people onto the new structure. So he's trying to get them onto this new Starlink structure, where they sign into a treaty of peace, and then it's overseen by these commanders in chief, and where the people have everything devolved back to them. And if people don't understand this or hearing it for the first time, Nick and I have talked about this in our past two interviews in detail, so you could go back and understand that more clearly. They're saying this, what's going on right now, regardless of what you're seeing on the mainstream media, is not about ethnic cleansing or religion. It is purely about ridding the corruption and the deep state from all Russian territory. So then I wanted to ask, is the Ukraine officially part of the Russian territory? Because we used to have something called the USSR. And then in 1991, everything was devolved and everyone was given their individual sovereignty. So it used to all belong to the USSR, and now it's devolved into separate kind of states and countries. And so I wanted to know, is the Ukraine officially part of the Russian territory now that that devolved situation has happened since the USSR? And they said yes and no. They said the Ukraine was independent on the whole after the dissolution of the USSR, but it has continued to receive financial aid from Russia. So Russia, to the greater extent, wants the Ukraine to run independently, but because it's being controlled by these deep state forces and these corrupt officials, then it's necessary for Putin to go in, and under the White Hat plan, they're trying to correct this. So if you think of it like, the way that I think of it is like in the UK, we have Scotland and Wales, and they have devolved governments. They make their own decisions within those locations, but they still fall within the entire cake called the UK. And so I think it's similar, that Russia has got these parts, like we've got Scotland and Wales, but overall, it still falls under Russia as a whole. So what the White Hats are trying to do, they are trying to implement this worldwide plan of peace, and they're trying to get everything reassigned, get all the countries in line with the peace plan, and then reassign it all to Starlink through these peace treaties. And so Putin, it would seem, is going in to get everything lined up. So in our previous interviews, they've given me a statistic that 75% of everybody was already signed in, and that 25% weren't. And so if the Ukraine are not signed in, or not in a position to be signed in a peaceful way without corruption, then they could be holding up the cake called Russia. If we go back to my example of like I was saying, with having Scotland and Wales being the whole thing.
A bit like UK, United Kingdom. So
Yeah.
Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and then we've got Scotland and Wales, which is part of the United Kingdom.
And they receive funding from central London, but they ultimately have devolved responsibility what they do with the money. But in a situation where perhaps they were being controlled or something was getting out of hand, then obviously Boris Johnson would still have the authority to go in and sort that out. And so I think that is what's going on with the Ukraine, because officially, I think that the Ukraine still falls under that entire Russian territory. So then I wanted to ask, will the world be sliced up differently once we get this new worldwide peace plan in place, when we get the Starlink all running and all the countries in a peaceful place? will the geography of the world be sliced up differently so that it'll be overseen in a different way? And they said that the new worldwide peace plan will see the military as guardians of peace, and in coordination with the Starlink, the geographical areas will be overseen by a commander-in-chief. There will not be a need for presidents or prime ministers, as the power will be devolved to the people. This is the overview of the plan in action in the Ukraine. Eventually, the people will have more power. So they're going through a difficult time right now, but essentially they don't have the full power that they're entitled to. So then I asked how many commanders-in-chief will oversee this entire world peace plan in the end. And they said that it is currently anticipated that the world will be divided up and overseen strategically by between 6 and 8 commander-in-chiefs. And I said, will the land masses be divided up differently to accommodate like all these changes that are going on right now? And they said, yes. And I said, can they explain? And they said that the land masses like Europe may in the future be brought together and overseen by one commander-in-chief. So this could mean, for instance, just as an example, that in the future, if Putin is a commander-in-chief, he could in effect be the commander-in-chief of a bigger region than Russia. And they are saying that it may not be officially called Russia in the future. They said they want us to think of it more in terms of north, east, south, west. And I said, could they explain? So what they're saying is, or what they're explaining to me, is that they think that the world will eventually be divided equally between these commander-in-chiefs like north, east, south, west, and that borders will not be necessary because of the Starlink infrastructure, and movement will be free-flowing. So they're saying that borders, in the sense that we currently understand them, won't exist under the Starlink and military plan in the future. So Putin might, for instance, oversee as a commander-in-chief the north geography of the map. So that could be anything in the north. That could be Canada, the UK, Europe, Russia, Iceland. So everything in the north could be overseen by a commander-in-chief, and that could be somebody like Putin. So then I asked, how far out are we from seeing this plan in action? And they're saying it's already started. And they're saying that the rollout will now continue with stealth, which is why I think we're seeing this sudden emergence of what's going on in the Ukraine, because I think they're pushing this forward now, more heavily to get it done. And then I asked, so will there be like more conflict and change like we're seeing in the Ukraine? Will we see that in other parts of the world if they're now wanting to roll this out with what they're calling stealth? And they said it will be, but only in areas where there is oppression towards the citizens or where there is deep state corruption. So I said, is the world at war, albeit silent, at the moment? And they said, yes, the world is in a psychological war with the dark forces of evil, and they are fighting hard to secure the minds of the people for their own gain. And I said, what would they gain? And they said that control, that's their ultimate thing that they want. They want control of humans. So I said, would the consequences to the world have been greater if someone like Putin or anyone else had not gone into the Ukraine. And they said the Ukraine is part of a strategic military plan, so they're repeating themselves, worldwide to secure peace and freedom longer term for its citizens. They then gave a warning to the citizens of Ukraine. And they said this in big capital letters. They said to me to say to the citizens of the Ukraine to stay indoors. They said, let the military do what it needs to do. And stay indoors so you can keep safe and they can go in and get the job done. I said, will the actions of Putin be replicated in other parts of the world to secure peace under this new worldwide military plan? And they said, at this moment in time, there are no more operations on the scale of Ukraine that are foreseen at this moment. So I said, so operations are possible, but not on such a large scale as the Ukraine. And they said, yes. Mm-hmm. And I said, can you say where these operations may take place? And they said, it's most likely to be in the Middle East. And I said, why the Middle East? And they said to secure resources like oil, gold, and land. Now, interestingly, even though I haven't channeled about the Middle East, they have told me before that that's one area that might not be signed in yet, that's not wanting to sign in to the plan. The United Arab Emirates is one place they keep saying to me that I don't think yet has signed in. So maybe that's why they're talking here about securing oil, gold, and land. I then said to them that I've also heard talk about Taiwan and that they might need a military overhaul or removal of the deep state. And they said that this is currently being discussed, but at this moment in time, they are undecided. So I'm wondering if, the Ukraine is kind of like a testing ground to see how it goes, to see if they need to change strategy, if they go into other regions. I then asked, is the Chinese leader, Prime Minister, Xi Jinping, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I asked, is he a white hat? And they said he is. And then I wanted to know how long this overhaul is going to take in the Ukraine. Are we looking at years or weeks or months? What are we looking at? And they told me that their plan, or it has been planned, to be very fast. And they want it to be completed in less than 4 to 6 weeks. So they want to be in and out, basically. But they did say that this is dependent on whether other countries try to become involved. And I said, why would that prolong it? And they said, the intention, of course, is to clear the deep state factions quickly, and then to devolve the decision-making back to the Ukrainian people. So if others start wading in, it could get messy. Because I said to them, civilian bloodshed has already been seen, or that's what we've been led to believe from images that are being posted. And they're saying that there's not an easy way to secure countries away from the deep state, away from their control, without some bloodshed. But this is not the intention or the purpose of the exercise. So their intention is not to harm the civilians. They did say that longer term, that the Ukraine will be a free nation, they called it a truly free nation. I said to them, if the Starlink had already been in place with and them were already signed in, then could this situation have been worked out differently, perhaps using sanctions or something like that? And they said, no, it couldn't have worked differently yet, because that decision has to have been made by the people when the things have been devolved. So it couldn't have worked differently yet. They're saying once this process is complete, then the new plan can be implemented to dissolve the decision-making, and the new treaty under the new military plan, it can then be assigned to the people, and they then can just, in their devolved state, can vote on what they want in the future. So then I said, are we replacing NATO with Starlink in the longer term? And they said yes and no. They said the two will be combined to create a new setup. I said, will this new setup be a white hat operation? They said yes. I said, is this new setup going to be called NATO Alliance? They said no. They said the new setup will be devolved to the people and is therefore a people's alliance. And they put that in like quotes. It'll be our alliance. They said in the future, I asked, in the future, will the Starlink and the People's Alliance be able to put sanctions in place without war if the bio phenomena or the peace treaties were breached? And they said, yes, the people will be involved in all decision-making, power will be devolved. And I said, what could sanctions look like when it's devolved to the people? What sanctions could they create? And they are fairly similar to what we could have now, but the people will be making the decision. They said they could turn off power or the internet. They could restrict people's movement, and they could restrict international trade. So it kind of sounds like we already have right now, but instead of the overseers, the deep state, the governments creating those sanctions, the people would be deciding that from our devolved status. I said, again, is the Ukraine part of this 25% that was not yet signed in? Not signed into this Starlink plan, because we were told there was 25% still not signed in. And they said, that this is a yes and a no, because as part of Russia, it is partially signed in under Russia overall. So they're saying that Russia is signing in, but because this little state over here, Ukraine, are not yet ready, it's kind of the whole cake is not signed in yet. So it'd be like London being signed in and Scotland and Wales aren't yet ready. They're saying all of it needs to be completely aligned by completely removing the offending factions of the deep state. So this is why I think they're going in with stealth, because I think we're getting very close. We're getting very close to getting this fully operational. I asked, who is Putin working alongside strategically? I said, is he working with the White Hats? He said, yes. Is he working with the Alliance? Yes. Is he working with Starlink? Yes. Is he working with Trump? Not at this time, not on this job. They said he's working with the Alliance, mostly.
But so is Trump working with the Alliance. But when you say he's not working with Trump, on this occasion, it's not directly with Trump, but they are part of this alliance to drain the swamp.
I think that if you think of it like a hierarchy, that Trump is even above the Alliance. I think he's above that. So I think if you think of all the commanders in chief, I think he's like the top one. And the layer below, not that we like layers anymore, but just to make it simplistic for understanding, if you've got 6 commanders here around the world, then you've got Trump above that, overseeing them. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine these 6 commanders are reporting into the alliance, and then the alliance is reporting into Trump. That's how I see it.
Okay.
That's how in my understanding, when they've explained it to me before, see it all working. And I wanted to look at the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I wanted to know if he's a white hat, and they said, no, he's not. They said he's not a white hat or a black hat. Actually, he's neutral. They said he is working with good intention towards the Ukrainian. No, then I asked, sorry, is he working with good intention towards the Ukrainian people, or has he been? And they said, no, he hasn't. And that he was also illegally installed into that position of prime minister by the deep state, probably through, fraudulent election, I would imagine. So I said, will this Volodymyr Zelensky, will he be removed by Putin? And they said yes and no. They're saying it will be seen over time that he was not the official winner of the elections held in the Ukraine. So I would imagine that the people, again, once this all gets sorted out, they will vote to have him maybe removed. Maybe Putin won't need to do that. Then I wanted to know about, I'm going back now to the US and their involvement in the Ukraine before Trump. So things like Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, John Kerry, Joe Biden, and there are possibly others. Have they got illegal interests in the Ukraine now and from the past? And they said they have. And I had seen something about power companies and energy. And they're saying that these people don't have interests in it, but I think their children do. So that's because they always answer me, very correctly. So they're saying they don't actually have interest in the power and the energy, but their children possibly do. I said, do they have illegal interests in gold and money in the Ukraine? And they said yes. And do they have interests in other things like the bio research that we've been talking about? And they said yes. So after all that had been channeled, I channeled that just a few hours ago between 2 and 5 this morning. And then when I looked at my phone when I woke up this morning, I saw that Elon Musk has put Starlink live in the Ukraine. Now, of course, the MSM are selling it that he's doing that to help the current leadership within the Ukraine. But I think this is very telling. This was released at 1 o'clock this morning, that now Starlink has gone live in the Ukraine.
Right.
So based on everything they've been teaching me for all these weeks, that's a bit of a coincidence, is it not? That's now gone live in the Ukraine. And then the final thing I've got for you today is something that I did with a friend of mine called Adam. This was before Christmas, actually. We were talking about the Starlink. Now, I think you've got this picture.
I want to hold it up for you, because I remember
if you could hold the picture up, and I'll tell them what he...
Sure.
I asked him about Starlink and the timelines. And if you look to the left of the picture, or to the very top of the picture, it shows the page of Pentacles. And this is showing that the Starlink is a new concept, but it is a system which is very, well backed by physical items. So it does exist. And they're saying that if you look underneath, you can see the tower. And this means that the old system will fall because of Starlink, and that in reality, it was already crumbling. So we looked at this reading, I think it was about November time. So in November, it was already crumbling because of Starlink, the old system. And the Four of Cups on this reading is showing that in the past, there's been a lot of resistance by the powers that be, obviously. And the Ace of Pentacles in the middle is showing that it's already there, the Starlink, is this system that we're talking about. People just aren't seeing it yet. And then you can see the Seven of Rods. And this is showing that in 7 weeks, that more and more people will start to see the system. And that the Empress under it is showing us that, showing the Empress under it shows it as a more natural system, which is going to be aligned with the people and the universe. And it's going to be teaming them with a new abundance for the people. They said that, he also said that people will initially fight against it. And this is why we can see the Seven of Rods and the Ten of Swords, because the people at first won't trust it. The Ten of Swords, he's saying as an outcome, in the close future, is that the old system is going to collapse. And he's saying that this number 10 is important because it means that in 7 to 10 weeks, that we were going to see this more clearly. Now, don't forget, we were looking at this in November, and we're now approximately 7 to 10 weeks in. So he's saying that the Ace of Cups is a key card because it will be an emotional new start for people via this new system. And that he's saying that this new system will understand the people. And he's saying that this new system is going to be likely to be understood better between January and February. Again, this was 7 to 10 weeks from when we looked at it. He's saying again that the old system needed to collapse. And he said that there's a clear message here that the old needs to collapse for the new to come in. And he said that my timeframes about Starlink were spot on. And he's saying that it's literally going to be the end of something and the literal rebirth of something else, something new, which is why the tower is there. Mm-hmm. So that was just something that I did with my friend Adam, as I said, in November, and I was asking him about Starlink and, when the people would perhaps see it for themselves or when it would have an impact. And that was the reading that he came up with. So okay. I hope that information is interesting.
That was very interesting. It was very detailed. Thank you so much. Now, you mentioned that there will be commander-in-chiefs governing, I don't want to use the word governing, but commander-in-chiefs in the divisions. You said that the world will be sliced in north, west, east, and, south, southwest, south, north, east, and west. And, how do you, when you say the governments will step down, then versus commander-in-chiefs, how do you explain that? Because you've mentioned that all the governments around the world will step down, but really we will still have some kind of governments being commander-in-chief. How can you explain that a little bit more? Because it sort of contradicts each other.
So the military are there to provide for the people. They don't operate under policy. They're not for liberals or liberals, Democrats, Republicans. They're not supposed to take sides. They're supposed to be there for the people. So under the new system, the people will have a devolved responsibility to vote for policy and not people. So they will decide what they want in their local towns and countries from their quantum voting system. And the military would just be overseeing the aspects of what hold it all together, which is the Starlink. That would be the system that we talk to. They won't be imposing anything on us. Mm-hmm. They're just the overseers. Mm-hmm. So it won't be like we have now, where we have people sitting in government or parliament, and we vote them in. And then once they're in, they do whatever they like. And then once they're there, we're stuck with them for 4 to 8 years. Now we're going to be deciding, each and every one of us, what we like the look of in terms of policy, and we'll be voting from our individual basis. And the Starlink system up here, which is the centralized system, will be the way that they hold it all together. And so the commanders can have larger geographical spaces, because we don't need all these layers of government and bureaucracy. It won't be necessary. So they could easily now oversee larger geographical spaces.
So you're saying that the commander-in-chiefs, they won't be acting as governments, because the people that will be acting as governments will be the people, we the people.
Yes,
we
People's
will be
Alliance.
Yeah,
they called it the People's Alliance. So we will be in control, and they will just be overseeing the structure of it, the infrastructure.
Okay.
So what that means is, if, like I was explaining in previous interviews, if part of the cake somewhere else isn't abiding, say one other commander-in-chief, as example, steps out of line and allows their part of the north, south, east, west to start doing things like, say, a CCP situation where they start tracking the people and punishing them, then the rest of the commanders will be able to lock them out of the system, lock them out of the Starlink system. And the Starlink system will run everything, the internet, the hospitals, so the banking, you wouldn't want to be shut out of it. Mm-hmm. But that's how they will police it.
Okay.
They will police it in a way that if one of the commander-in-chiefs or one of the geographical areas starts to use the system incorrectly, the system will first of all alert them to that fact, because my understanding, how they've told me before, is that the system has been programmed with stops and back checks. So if anything that they start to do is starting to track us in a way that's detrimental to our freedom, then it will alert the other commander-in-chiefs, and it will alert the system.
Okay. So the other thing is, how do you explain to most people who are just understanding or grasping what's going on? How do you explain to most people, especially the people in Ukraine, that there is a deep state? Most people don't even know that there is a deep state. They don't know what a deep state is. They have no idea how long they've been in power for. How do you explain that to them when you've said earlier that this is not a traditional war? This is in a way to get rid of the deep state, because normal people would think that, anyone that goes to war, it's not the solution. So how do you explain that?
I think it's very difficult to explain it to people that don't understand what a deep state is. But a friend of mine who's visited Kiev, which is the capital of the Ukraine in the past, has told me that in the capital there was all these flowers, loads and loads of flowers everywhere. And he said to the locals, why are there all these flowers everywhere? Because normally we see flowers if there's been a death, a memorial type thing. And he said that he was told by the locals that when there had been a peaceful protest in the past, that the government had come out and shot all the people. 100 people just got shot in the street. And so in that sense, they are aware that something perhaps is not what we would call total freedom or democracy, because if you can't go out into the street and do a peaceful protest without being shot, then obviously that there's something not right there with your freedoms. But I think, as in everywhere in the world right now, not everybody will understand things until it's in hindsight. And then when we look back, they're going to understand, that we had to go through this process to get you to a safer, freer place.
Mm.
And it's like we've got to go through some pain now in order to get to this better place.
The way I explain it to people, and I just throw it to them. And some of them, it's like, wow, I want to know more. And some people, it's like, wow, that's so far-fetched. So what I say is there's a group of people, they've been in power for hundreds of years, if not thousands. They control the media, banking, medicine, the food industry, the music, Hollywood, everything. And we pay taxes to them. They control the royals, the Vatican, and they're evil. They want to enslave us in virtual chains like we have been. And the reason why they hate Trump and the reason why media hates Trump is because he's a people's president and he's trying to finally destroy or get rid of the deep state, these people, so that we could get, so that he could bring power back to the people, and which is going to be massive and historic. And they just can't believe it. They think it's just too fantastical, But when I say to them, well, if you were to tell the last generation of the black slaves that they were going to be freed, they too would think it would be fantastical. But we just happen to be at this point. And, cognitive dissonance is our worst enemy at the moment. We have to be open-minded. So that's what I say. And I just wanted to say that just in case people for the first time are listening,
Well, that's a brilliant explanation of exactly what's going on.
Absolutely. Now, so this is what's going on. So when we say Putin is strategically getting rid of the deep state, because they will do everything they can to stay in power. They don't care. These people torture. I don't want to say too much because we're on YouTube. Yeah. But they torture. They want to enslave us. They have no empathy. They are dark people. They will do everything to stay in power. So when you want to save a ship that's sinking, it's either if there's going to be some collateral damage to save the rest of the ship and the people in it, or everyone goes. And that's what's happening right now.
Exactly. That's a good way of looking at it, actually. Yeah.
So now my next question is, when Trump says, well, if my administration was still here, we wouldn't let this happen. It's because of Biden. Is he playing optics, or is he saying, well, if it was my administration, if I was still in power, there wouldn't be a deep state in the Ukraine, and therefore we wouldn't need to be getting rid of them? Is that what he's saying? What do you think about that?
Well, I think this is a brilliant way for him to show the people that Biden's not in control, and to make it look, and to put the pressure on Biden's administration right now. And who knows what it would have looked like if Trump had got in. It would have been a completely different situation, obviously. But I just think this adds power to Trump in the future and the new setup, because it's helping the people that we've just been talking about that aren't yet awake to what's going on, to see that Biden is just not in control of this situation.
Absolutely. Well, that's been a very interesting interview, Michelle. Thank you so much for working hard and sharing that with us. We know how draining it is, channeling and tiring it is. So thank you so much. You really deserve a lot of credit for that. And to Charlie, who, Charlie Ward, who helped you with the Russian intelligence as well. So thank you to Dr. Charlie Ward. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish, Michelle?
Yeah, Charlie helped me yesterday to understand the politics of it all, so that I could get the questions right in my mind. But the thing I just want to reiterate, which they said to me to say to the citizens of the Ukraine, is stay indoors, stay safe, and just let them go in and get the job done. Let them go in and get the job done.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michelle, and we'll speak to you very soon. And God bless you all, and have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.